talk about how bacteria causes diseases in the human body. Something so tiny can cause so many problems. So the first and most common way is that bacteria will release toxins into your bloodstream. So they create these poisons and they enter your bloodstream, and they can cause a host of problems. If they affect your throat, you get a sore throat, or your body tries to zap them with heat and you get a fever. Sometimes they even cause paralysis, which means you get paralyzed. Something interesting is that there is a little bacteria called botulinum, and it secretes a poison that causes paralysis. But they've actually found a way to harvest this poison and use it in this cosmetic procedure called Botox. So they take the toxin that this little bacteria produces, and that's meant to cause full body paralysis, and they inject it into the forehead or wherever someone has wrinkles, and it temporarily, for a few months, paralyzes these muscles so the person loses the wrinkles in those areas. You can always tell when someone has Botox above their eyebrows. When they lift their eyebrows, nothing wrinkles up there because they can't. They're paralyzed by this bacteria toxin that was extracted and put into a shot. So that is one way that bacteria causes disease. They release toxins. Another way is that they destroy body tissue, and they do that by destroying cells. And over time, the destroyed cells will leave these gaping holes in tissues. So there's a condition called tuberculosis caused by a bacteria, and throughout time, the person can have very damaged lung tissue because of the way these bacterial cells have eaten through the body cells. Another way is that bacteria, they grow so quickly, they can double their population every 20 minutes, that within time they'll start to overcrowd the body cells. And when a cell is overcrowded, it cannot function normally, which can cause many ripple effects in the human body. So here's a bacteria cell. We're going to get to how this causes diseases in a second. This is like a side tour. This is a cell, a bacterial cell that doesn't have enough nutrients. And so when that happens, sometimes they can form these things called spores. So majority of the cytoplasm dies, and all of the DNA and a little bit of cytoplasm is then retained in this extremely resilient spore. It can handle extremely harsh environments. And when the condition becomes favorable again, or the food source returns, this spore will germinate into a full-blown bacteria. Well, sometimes people can breathe in these bacterial spores, and that can cause some bacterial infections. One example is anthrax. This was used as a form of bioterrorism right after the 9/11 attacks in New York City and the Twin Towers. They sent these anthrax spores through mail to the post office, and some postal workers inhaled these spores in their lungs, and I'll show this video in a second on what happened. And they also sent it to a senator who they were trying to kill. So let me play this video, and it will show how anthrax spores cause disease.
During harsh conditions, the large rod-shaped bacteria that cause anthrax develop into spores that can be released into the air and inhaled. Inhaled spores are swept into the trachea, which divides into the bronchus. Because of their small size, the spores are carried into smaller and smaller bronchioles, eventually reaching the tiny alveolar sacs of the lung. In the alveolar spaces, immune cells called macrophages engulf the spores and attack them with enzymes. Although some spores are destroyed, many others survive the immune attack. The surviving spores travel through the lymphatic system and accumulate inside lymph nodes in the chest. After a period of time, the spores will germinate and grow into full-fledged anthrax bacteria, which replicate within the lymph nodes. As these bacteria multiply, they produce harmful toxins that cause the lymph nodes to swell and hemorrhage. The toxins also travel through the bloodstream, rapidly producing the dramatic symptoms of anthrax. Within a few days after the initial exposure, cold-like symptoms including fever, cough, aches, and general malaise develop. Although some people experience a brief recovery, this is followed by a rapid onset of more serious symptoms.
Okay, so this is another example of how toxins from a bacteria can affect the human body. All right, the last one I want to show you is Salmonella. This is a bacteria that you get when you eat food off of a surface that hasn't been fully cleaned. So Salmonella has a superpower when it enters your cell. Check it out.
Full speed. Nice motile Salmonella screaming along here. Meow. Here she comes. Boom. Okay, it's got a type 3 secretion system. Squirts in proteins. Triggers major vent. Meow. Here she comes. Boom. Satisfied, right? Haven't taught these videos how to burp yet. Okay, bacteria's inside. The vacuole coming in. This is Chris's finger pushing the Salmonella in. Here's our bacteria. The yellow stuff is actin. That's what's pulling the bacteria in, and it's absolutely needed. We then have fusion with things called early endosomes. This is a normal event. Then we're going to zoom in on the bacteria. We're going to see a second type 3 secretion system, a second syringe that's actually going to put proteins out into this vacuole. Poof. Now we have a protective coating. Now, bring on the lysosomes. Bring on the toxic delivery particles. Bacteria doesn't care. You're going to see these things come in, ka-tink, ka-tink, glance off. It blocks the fusion of these things, so it's not going to die. Not only that, it starts to divide and divide and divide. Eventually, it'll divide so much that this thing will actually probably explode and then release the bacteria. We don't know anything about the final event, and that's why I wouldn't let the video animators draw the cell exploding, because we don't know that happens yet. We guess it does, but we haven't seen it.
Okay, so that's an example of how a cell could harbor this bacteria. The bacteria can grow inside of the cell, and most likely he is suggesting that the cell will burst as a result of this infection, and that could lead to some tissue damage for the infected person.